United Kingdom suspends its extradition treaty with the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, further inflaming tensions with China. Well, this follows criticism of the new national security law and the announcement to ban Chinese tech firm Huawei from its 5G network by 2027. Well, Chinese ambassador to the UK, Liu Xiaoming, said, quote, "The United Kingdom should have an independent foreign policy rather than to dance to the tune of the Americans." But with U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo kicking off his two-day visit to the United Kingdom, will Prime Minister Johnson be pleasured or pressured to pull away from Beijing? What is this calibrated approach the Prime Minister says he will adopt? And what is driving the decisions of the United Kingdom? To discuss these issues, I'm joined by Dr. Yu Jie, Senior Research Fellow on China at Chatham House, Dr. Edward Tse, founder and CEO of the Gao Fund Advisory Company, and Mike Rose, former Director General of Invest HK. That is our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Zhou Yue. Let's talk about the headline-making news. Of course, is the UK's decision to suspend its extradition treaty with Hong Kong and has also extended an arms embargo. But Mike, what do we make of this extradition treaty? Does it really matter that much?
On the face of it, no. I don't think there's a huge movement in either direction. And I think the first thing to say is a great pity that Hong Kong did not take the opportunity to legislate itself on national security. From the promulgation of the Basic Law in 1990 up to 1997, even though it was still British administration, there were opportunities to tidy up the law. In fact, there was a bill in front of the Legislative Council that would have dealt with much of Article 23, national security legislation. For some reason, it wasn't enacted at that time. And the government then tried again in 2003, but rather clumsily. That failed. There was a lot of opposition to it. And then nothing. I mean, when tempers had cooled, say from 2010 onwards, we had 10 years to do this. And we just didn't do it. So that's the first thing to say about the national security legislation. We should have done it ourselves. We failed. And then you've got these two recent developments of, first of all, the US under Trump declaring all sorts of trade, economic, technological, I won't say warfare, but challenges to China, confronting China. And then last year, of course, the extradition legislation generated a lot of opposition, which turned later into violence. So with those two developments, the confrontation with the US and then the violence on the streets in Hong Kong, it made it inevitable that Beijing would step in with the legislation. We couldn't have that vacuum continuing any longer. Unfortunately, I think if you look at it in that broader context, then what China has done is perfectly sensible. I think if you take a more shallow perspective, more immediately, then the UK is going to point to the possibility that persons could be removed from Hong Kong to the mainland in certain rare circumstances. And I think that would cause quite a lot of countries to review the extradition arrangements with Hong Kong for fear, and it is only a possibility, that one or two of the people that were returned here quite properly under those agreements could theoretically end up in court in the mainland.
Edward, what do you make of the impact of the suspension of this treaty? Because according to what I've read, only 10 people have been extradited since 1997 between Hong Kong and the UK. Why is this a big deal?
I think the concern is, as Mike was saying, that I think the UK government was concerned about the possibility, albeit a very, very tiny possibility, that somebody who is going to be extradited from the UK will ultimately be shipped to Beijing, which is highly unlikely, but that I think is the concern about it. But if you look at the past records, there haven't been a lot of movements between Hong Kong and the UK in this respect. So overall speaking, at least from the Hong Kong perspective, as a Hong Konger myself, we don't really see this as a big deal. But of course, this could turn into a haven for people who have committed crimes and perhaps some fugitives, but that will be the case.
But do you think it is more of a political message to Beijing that the UK is not happy with the status quo?
I think that would be the case.
And Yu Jie, of course, this is related to a bigger picture. As Mike just mentioned, the UK-US relations, the UK-China relations. Mike Pompeo has already started his two-day visit to the UK. The timing of the decision is very delicate. What do you make of his agenda in the UK?
Well, obviously, it really signifies a reset of the so-called UK-China relations, the bilateral relations between the two countries. I think so far what we have experienced is that the British government is still trying to figure out what it can do. So whether the UK can happily coexist, want to take China's economic opportunity on the one hand, while on the other hand address its very self-conscious national interest concerns. So I think UK government is still very confused about what they want to do so far. So Boris Johnson, I'm not quite sure he has really made up his mind yet as such, but obviously he is under enormous pressure with lobbying from the United States and also from other so-called like-minded countries as well.
You said that he hasn't made his mind yet, but the suspension of Huawei services in the United Kingdom to the Chinese sounded like a very strong message that the UK is walking away from its business cooperation with China, because he definitely can expect a retaliation.
Well, we would expect some kind of retaliation or kind of measures taken from Beijing's side. But what I'm saying is that firstly, Huawei is only one particular sector, which is the telecom in the UK, that the company has been banned by the British government. But secondly, if you look into the larger picture, that the Chinese investment are really come across real estate, civil nuclears, even in student housing and in various other tourism and retail sectors. So I think the UK government would not be economically rational by completely abandoning all the Chinese investment came to the UK. And that is just not economically rational, really, in the post-COVID scenarios to the UK.
Well, probably Prime Minister Johnson wants to have both ends. But Mike, can the British do both things, economically enjoying cooperation with China and politically antagonizing China?
I think Johnson and the British government are still really considering their options here. They've kicked Huawei the can down the road until 2027. That gives them a little bit of breathing space, but his #1 priority right now, I think, is a trade deal with the USA. Because following Brexit, the UK economy is going to be, I think, in serious trouble. I think it was a very unwise decision. I understand some of the emotion behind it and the referendum vote, but economically this was an act of foolishness. And therefore, to cover up, if you like, or to try and minimize the damage, Johnson needs a whole string of good trade deals, principally with the US, but then also, I'm sure, with Australia, New Zealand, and other places. But, Pompeo, of course, is ex-CIA, is a hardcore guy. He's putting the squeeze on the UK government. Okay, you want a trade deal? we can do that, but you've got to toe the line when it comes to other things.
So
and
a lot
we've
of
got
Chinese
a big
think
agenda.
that not antagonizing the U.S., falling in line may work for the British, but it definitely not in the interest of the British people. Is that something?
I would absolutely correct. I think this is why I say I don't think it's a definitive decision. I think he'll get his trade deal as fast as he can. Remember, Trump probably going to leave office in January, depending on the result in November. But either way, the U.S. establishment is definitely can't come to grips with the fact that China is a rising power, and it's going to be a bipolar world, not a unilateral U.S.-led world. They still have to come to grips with that, and I think they're some way off from doing that, which is unfortunate for the whole world.
Yeah.
But they'll get there eventually because it's inevitable. It's an irreversible trend of history that China will become a great power and at least deserves to be treated equally with the U.S.
Dr. Yu, what do you think of the argument that the British are actually inch smart and feet stupid by getting away from China, falling in line with the U.S. at this critical moment?
Well, I think there's several layers in this case. And firstly, let's talk about domestic layers. You know, as we all know, foreign affairs is an extension of domestic politics. Now, if you look into the Tory party, the British Conservative Party, the 70% of people, the Tory party members who have voted for Boris Johnson in the last election, that very much agree with that Boris Johnson's decision regarding Huawei. So within the domestic constituency, Boris Johnson have to show he's doing something. That's just for the domestic reason. Now, secondly, within the British Tory party elite, British Conservative Party elites, there's always a question on the foreign affairs for any incumbent prime minister. This has never been any exception since 1945, since Winston Churchill was the prime minister. So the British Conservative Party prime minister always faces a question on Europe. And now, given the post-Brexit scenario, it seems that Europe question has resolved. And now China just automatically becomes that diplomatic question. Therefore, the desperately number 10 will have to answer. So, all in all, this internal party conflicts lead to some external consequences, and therefore we have the result of the UK's decision.
But what is Boris Johnson's answer? What about those golden era relationship, blossom friendship between UK and China under David Cameron?
I think it's almost like a reset by itself. So I would rather say
180-degree turn.
Sorry.
180-degree turn.
I wouldn't argue this is a 180-degree turn. I mean, at least there's not really a bipartisan consensus yet between Tory party and Labour Party. They want to relentlessly go against China. I think let's not go that far. But what surely we could realize is for the very moment, the bilateral relations between London and Beijing have really cooled down very much.
Let's also talk about the latest announcement by Prime Minister Johnson. Edward, Johnson said that up to 3 million Hong Kong residents may be offered a path to UK citizenship. So, is this really about UK opposition to the national security law in Hong Kong, or is it a change of policy in terms of immigration?
I think this is also another political move by Boris Johnson and his supporters. I think this is a signal that they want to send to the Chinese government and the Hong Kong SAR government that they're not happy with how the national security law was legislated. I think that fundamentally the UK government have misread the situation with respect to Hong Kong. Hong Kong have had, as you know, over a year of unrest and widespread protests. And essentially the city was becoming very ungovernable. And many suspected that there were a lot of other forces involved as well. And for Hong Kong as an SAR under the one country, two systems, without a national security law, it's almost unthinkable. And unfortunately, we, meaning the SAR government, haven't really been able to legislate our own law, and therefore, the Beijing came out and said, here's how we should do it. I think the UK government is not very happy with that because I think they still feel that they have some responsibility to Hong Kong. And whatever they have decided to do with the BNO passports is an indication of their displeasure or disagreement with how the process goes.
Because, Mike, until probably last year, the United Kingdom's government has not uttered many words on Hong Kong since 1997. And now it seems the British agree with Americans that the national security law has made the future of Hong Kong questionable. But is it a sound judgment?
No, absolutely not. And I think on the issue of nationality, I get quite excited. I hope I don't get too emotional on your show, because up until 1983, all Hong Kong passport holders could go to the UK freely and settle. And the Brits changed their law. Actually, it was a 1981 bill that became effective in 1983, precisely to strip Hong Kong people of their right to go and live in the UK.
So they didn't want the Hong Kongers to go back then, but they want them to go now.
No, they don't. And they did come up with a scheme, in the towards the end of British administration, 50,000 heads of household could apply if they had a reason. And of course, the BNO passport, most people recognize how useless it was. It didn't give you the right of abode anywhere. Didn't even give you the right of abode in Hong Kong. All it says in the BNO is the holder of this passport is also the holder of Hong Kong identity card number so-and-so, which gives the holder bearer right of abode in Hong Kong. So the BNO passport itself was completely irrelevant.
So why Johnson is doing all these things this sounds morally questionable and politically inconsistent.
It's absolutely farcical. The British had the same option as Portugal back before the handover. Okay, anyone who wants to be Portuguese, they said in Macau, just ask for a passport. If the British had said it at that time, anyone who wants a British passport can have one, I think that the world would have just gone on smoothly. They didn't do that. It was dishonorable. They were not prepared to have large numbers of Hong Kong people emigrating. And even now, they're not giving it back. They're talking about a road, a pathway. If you come here and settle and buy a house and set up a business and you're paying taxes, then after 5 years you can apply for this, and then after 1 more year you can apply for that. This is disgraceful, actually. You want to do it, do it. Otherwise, this is just a game. It's just a gesture.
Okay. I want to talk more about the economic issue between China and the UK. Earlier, Yu Jie mentioned that maybe Huawei is an isolated case. It won't have ripple effects across different sectors. What do you make? What do you make of this current situation? Do you think the Chinese businesses still have confidence to invest in the UK under the current circumstances? Mike?
Oh, sorry.
Me or yeah.
No. I think this is going to be a huge issue. We have the most advanced telecoms equipment in the world from Huawei. It's cheaper and better quality than anything anyone else is producing. The spooks in the UK looked at it from top to bottom and said, we can't see any danger here, it's okay, and we can monitor the installation and make sure that the UK's interest is protected. That was, what, a year ago? And then suddenly, this sharp reversal only after the Americans had taken up the cudgel against Huawei. It makes no sense at all. And if I were any kind of Chinese investor, I would be very, very cautious about investing in the UK.
Dr. Yu,
they're not honoring what they did.
Dr. Yu, what do you say to that? Because if I'm a Chinese businessman, I've been making profits there, I've been bringing revenues to your people, and all of a sudden you change your policy simply because of pressure from the US. What would I think?
Now, my idea on this, just regarding the Chinese investment in UK or any foreign investment in UK, I mean, surely the British government do need to have a bilateral investment treaty with irrespective whatever the foreign countries they're dealt with. At the moment, the British government does not really have such a mechanism. They live under the EU and mechanism. So that's definitely one thing. In the post-Brexit scenario, Member Chen Downing Street need to work a very clear set of agenda to specify which sector that would allow to have foreign investment and which sector is definitely not.
Are you saying telecommunication is a no to investors from China?
So far, sorry. Obviously, what happened so far is not very unclear. It's always, okay, we'll welcome your investments on the one hand, and then after 6 months we do a U-turn. So it caused a lot of inconsistency and confusion towards investors. I'm not just saying the Chinese investors, but also the investors from all different countries in the world. So I think that's really so much work need to be done for the British government at this very moment.
That is not a very good message after Brexit for British people.
Well, it clearly is not a very clear message. I mean, one thing for the current British government is it caused a lot of confusion on many things, not just on foreign investment, even in terms of how to combating COVID-19. I mean, until this day now, this government is still debating about whether it should wear a face mask. So clearly, just to indicate you the mindset of the government has not really prepared so much regarding the changes which is about to happen.
No, not prepared is not a good thing for anything that is happening in the world. And now let's take a look at what some of the internet users have been saying about UK-China relations. Lee said, and the session of Gov could be nicknamed as Gov-U. So many U-turns in his policies, maybe another U-turn on Huawei before 2027. Wish the China-UK relations can be back on track. Those very conservative decisions makers need to look forward, not backward. I'm not sure they're looking anywhere for certain, but let's talk about Johnson's policy, because he quote, we've got to have a calibrated approach. We're going to be tough on some things. He's talking about China policy. We're going to continue to engage. But he didn't say in which areas, what issues he's going to be tough, and what are the areas he's going to engage. No clarity. Edward?
Yeah, I think he's still trying to figure out what to do. This whole thing came pretty abruptly, I think, even to him and his administration. And it's very clear that he's still in a mode of sort of reacting. There's so much that the UK and China can work together. Dr. Yu has already talked about the various type of investments that the Chinese businesses can do in the UK. Every year there's tons of Chinese students coming to going to the UK and attend universities. And I think there's also one very important issue, is that the ban on Huawei is going to significantly hurt the UK, in my view, because it's not only about the cost that it incurred, but also, importantly, about the time that it would lose. A couple of years of delay of installing 5G is a big, big deal in the digital economy that we're in today. The world, unfortunately, is dividing itself into countries that are sort of the haves, the countries that have got the digital economy, and the countries that do not. And I think increasingly that digital divide is going to be becoming bigger and bigger, unfortunately. And by delaying itself in you know, in the 5G installation, I think the UK is going to fall behind quite significantly. I think the British citizens will really need to watch out for the consequences of this decision for themselves.
I'd like to give all of you some numbers on China's exposure to the UK. China is now the UK's third largest export market after the US and EU, 4.4% of all UK goods and services. A recent report by Cambridge Econometrics for China-Britain Business Council finds that the UK-China relationship supports over 100,000 jobs. But the problem is time on China's side. Obviously, the British has chosen America this time because they worry about UK-America trade deal, which is important for the British. But is it wise to antagonize the third trading partner and counting up? Mike?
It's absolutely unwise. Most of British trade is with the EU, and somehow the Brits have made a mess of that. They're talking about hiring 50,000 customs officers sometime in the next 5.5 months. Well, good luck with that. And this is because they were so fed up with the bureaucracy of the 35,000 EU bureaucrats. So 35,000 is so terrible, we must get out of the EU. And by the way, now let's have 50,000 more civil servants to handle all the trade documentation. I mean, what a nonsense. So somehow they've got to make smooth relations with the EU. The next big one for them is the US. But take a longer term view. The UK's got to have, if it's going to be saved, it's got to have global connections, not just the Five Eyes. It's got to be much wider than that. It's got to do deals with Asia, and that means principally China. You can't freeze China out of world trade. It's already the second largest economy. It's a huge partner. Potentially it could be even bigger for the UK. But why cut off your nose?
But probably the British are counting on their assumption that maybe the Chinese will still live with that, will not retaliate in countermeasures. That
China will be more mature than Britain. Yes, all right, I would hope so, but there's bound to be something done. But this is a path to pain for everybody. Why are we doing this? Why are they doing this?
And also, Edward, there is also another worrying development because the British military have drawn up plans to send their HMS Queen Elizabeth to join the United States and Japan to have military exercises in the South China Sea, which is something that the Chinese are especially concerned. Do you think this will go down as something that can further round the relations between the two?
My sense is that this decision made by the UK Navy is a call by the Americans. As you know, the Americans have had already their own aircraft carriers in the region in South China Sea already. And you know, the Americans would like to make a big deal out of it, even though China doesn't really want to make it a big deal.
Yeah, and for the British, who haven't been traveling this part of the world for many years. All right, I have to cut it off here. Thank you very much, Dr. Yu. Thank you, Edward, and thank you, Mike. And you've been watching Dialogue here on CGTN. I'm Zhou in Beijing. Goodbye.